All right, welcome into the third episode of Rafi's Food and Conversations podcast. I'm David Allen alongside Justine Post. We are so glad to be back for our third episode. Got so much good feedback on the first two, but more than anything else, Justine, people have been beating down our doors asking for bird updates after our last episode. How are the Cardinals doing in the Post-Hammond household?
It's a really important question. We had a lovely nest of cardinals last time we recorded, and they flew. And then a couple months later, they made another nest across our little pathway. And so we've got more cardinals in the front. And we were out of town for vacation, but we came back and the eggs have hatched and they've already moved on. And, it's lovely over here. What about you in bluebird territory?
Yeah, same. Bluebirds, second round, have come back. More eggs are down. We're locked in. We're paying attention. The cats are also locked in and paying attention. They making the wildest noises you've ever seen as the birds come by. So it's been great. Love doing that. And I think we might have another birder in our midst, so we can talk about that later on. Thank you guys for listening and making it to the third episode. Hope you checked out Come to the Table's work and Rafi's work at rafiusa.org. Excited to tell you a little bit about what we have going on this fall and going into next year, hopefully in the next couple of episodes. But we've got a great couple of guests here today, Justine. So I honestly don't want to waste any more time. I'm going to let you introduce them and then we'll get going.
Thanks. Yeah, this is exciting. This is our first time we're having two guests on the pod. So let me introduce Taylor and Sakeenah. Taylor Johnson is a domestic policy advisor with Bread for the World's Policy and Research Institute. He conducts analysis on current data and research and advises the organization on federal and state policy reforms that address hunger and poverty in the U.S. And Sakeenah Shabazz is the Deputy Director of Policy and Research Institute. Prior to this role, she served as an appointed Senior Policy Advisor at the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services. Before joining USDA, Sakeenah served as Policy Director at Berkeley Food Institute, Senior Program Associate at the Congressional Hunger Center, and Program Associate at DC Hunger Solutions. We are so excited to have both of you here. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's good to be here. Y'all are a good crowd. This is where we want to be. This is great.
Y'all's bios are like a little too impressive. I don't like that. Reading that back, I'm like, dang, we need something fun in those bios. Those things are serious. I mean, come on.
Okay, well, it's kind of the end of the summer. We're wrapping up our travel plans. Maybe some folks have some end of year travel. So we want to know if you all have any travel hot takes. What's something that you can't stand? Anything that you love to do and have to do when you're traveling?
I'll chime in. I just came back from a well-deserved vacation. I'll tell you that. Everybody on this call and everybody listening probably works too hard. And if you have PTO, you should take it. And I just came back from some really fun travel. And the middle of the trip, I went to Toronto for the first time. And I was so impressed by the city. It is truly diverse. It is truly delicious. The Toronto Tempo WNBA team they lost to the Minnesota Lynx, but it was still a really, really good game, and they are good fans out there. I will say, travel-wise, I won't give any free promo to that company that you are able to rent a room from or an apartment from for your staycation versus a hotel. But on this trip, I had two mishaps with my rentable apartment where I had to cancel them and ended up staying at a hotel. You really want to be able to cook. You want to be able to be comfortable. And they were just not up to par. And, I appreciate that people want to be entrepreneurial and earn a little extra income on the side and hopefully not distorting their local rental markets too much. But I think we're back to hotels. The that company that shall not be named is it was not doing what it needed to do, but the hotels ended up being comfortable, and I'm just grateful that I got to turn my brain off for about a week and just get to feel connected and feel relaxed. But if you need a hotel, just book a hotel. That's my hot take for summer travel.
Hey, we got to talk Olivia Miles later on the links. She's a baller.
She's good. A baller. She's good.
Taylor, what about you?
Yeah, hopefully you all didn't have this company that shall be named as a potential sponsorship for this podcast.
Yeah, they're coming down the line.
Might have just blown up any sponsorship opportunities. My hot travel take, obviously, when you travel, you want to remember, you want to look back on those travels in fond memories. And sometimes pictures can assist in that. My hot take is that not everything needs a picture. Sometimes in this age of digification and like screen up here all the time, like take a picture, put it down, and observe. Just be a part of it. Just be in it. I like to travel to like mountains and forests. And like, yeah, you can take a picture of a sunset, but the memory of that sunset, if you are able to witness it and be a part of it, is so much more clear, and I think brings a lot more joy to me and my family than just looking back at a picture. And it doesn't do it justice. So not everything needs a picture. Not everything needs a picture.
I guess the camera does not eat first with you, Taylor. The camera
certainly, my camera hardly ever eats, actually. I have starved my camera.
I hope this means that you are of the opinion that no one is really watching concerts on their phone after they record concerts as well. But
stop it. It needs to end.
David might be personally offended by that comment.
No, absolutely not. Okay. I do love concerts. I do not love taking concert videos.
Good. Just making sure. Mine is really all I could think about with this question was I'm a big stickler on the passing lane. We just took a big road trip up to Michigan and back. And I'll tell you, the people that hang out in the passing lane and are just cruising and not using their cruise control really drives me crazy. So I'm just going to stick to a very practical one that really bothers me a lot, which is get out of the passing lane. Y'all, if you're in the left-hand lane and you're just not using your cruise control, just gently move over to the side. Thanks for listening. David, finish us off.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I just have to briefly say, Taylor, your background is blurred, but game recognizes game, and we both have the LBJ for biography. Yes, I just had to say that. We can discuss that later. Here's mine. It's more of a half-baked idea than it is a hot take. When you get to a plane, I want them, if they have a screen that has the movies on them, I want them to curate. If it's a 90-minute flight, give me some 90-minute movies that I can watch in the time there. If it's a 5-hour flight, I wouldn't even mind them saying, "Hey, here's a little double feature action. If you want to try to knock 2 out, I have sat down on a plane and been 17 minutes short, and it's my own fault. I could have done the math, but make it easy on me, airlines, and give it to me. So,
little Barbenheimer double feature.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Those are our travel hot takes. They're not brought to you by the rental company that shall not be named. But listen, if you're an airline listening and you want to sponsor Food and Conversations, we're all ears. So
awesome. Well, thank you all. Let's dive in and get started. We invited you all here because there is a lot happening with SNAP and a lot of other nutrition assistance programs. A lot has happened in the last year and a half. We've been trying to stay on top of things, and there's just a lot of communication. Things can be missed. So we wanted to bring you all here to kind of discuss that and try to stay as up to date as we possibly can. So this question's for Sakeenah. Can you share a bit about the state of food assistance policies that you all are tracking and what's at stake?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think I'll just take maybe less than 30 seconds to say, Taylor and I are coming in and representing Bread for the World, and we're a faith-based organization that's been around for 51 years. Last year was our 50th anniversary, And using moral voice, moral advocacy, and savvy analysis and research, we really want lawmakers to do all they can to end hunger, both domestically and globally. Taylor and I focus specifically on the domestic nutrition program, and the research and analysis that we do informs our advocacy strategy, the work of our government relations team, our public messaging, and is really meant to educate our members and just to make sure that we're staying as up to date as possible on both what's happening on the Hill in Congress with agencies, and then really trying to understand and articulate what that looks like at the state level, on the ground level, with, some of those direct impacts, especially as it relates to changes in our federal nutrition safety net. A lot has happened over the last year and a half, and I think one of the most characteristic features is just the speed with which things have happened, of grants being terminated, of laws being passed, of rules and regulations being implemented, that I would say just personally are at a speed that is just unfamiliar for the policy landscape that I've worked in for the last 10 years. And I think, Justine, you mentioned this already, we're tracking SNAP closely, the WIC program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. SNAP formerly was the Food Stamp program. A lot of the other programs that we're thinking about and tracking fit neatly under the Farm Bill. The WIC is not under the Farm Bill, but SNAP is, GusNIP is, other TFAP, which funds food banks, are all under that umbrella of the Farm Bill. And I would say the state of things is a state of retraction. I think that's characteristic of the policy environment that we're in right now. And Taylor and I had a conversation this morning with another partner organization, and they used the word abundance. And they were saying, I don't know what it's like to work in the policy space where abundance is the standard, where more and the intention of making sure that people are living more food secure lives is the standard. This person was talking about the era in which they are working in national advocacy is one where the belt is tightening. And I think that is true by and large of our federal landscape. I think our states are responding sometimes in lockstep with federal policy, but sometimes trying to figure out where to fill some of those gaps when cuts happen to SNAP, when the government shuts down and programs are not funded, like we saw with WIC. Or WIC was funded, but states started to put up their own money to make sure that participants in their state could continue to access it, so that there was no gap in services. And I agree with that assessment that we talked about. It is not an environment of abundance. I think that abundance mindset ends up coming from community and, sort of specific to bread, our church networks and, folks just trying to figure out what to do. But that abundance should not be absent of federal investment and legislation that really ensures that people who are entitled to programs are able to continue accessing them. And so the state is one of retraction, but I also don't think it's all doom and gloom. There is good advocacy that's happening. There are good legislators, I would say, sometimes from both sides of the aisle, who don't want to see their constituents go hungry, but they need to hear those stories. They need to be flooded with data. They need to be implored to vote to do all they can to end hunger. But outwardly, it's tough. It's tough, and I think it can be demoralizing. But I think part of our task is to continue doing our work and to continue being in coalition and continue to dare I say, speak truth to power and let that data speak to it. And I would say, just in terms of what's at stake, is just people's livelihoods, like actual ability to put food on the table is at stake. There are lots of reporting coming out right now of, states that report data on a month-to-month basis of participation in SNAP. And we are absolutely floored by the number of children who are no longer participating in SNAP. The children are not subject to work requirements, but the adults or the caregivers who are enrolled in the program are losing access in a way that is really, really alarming and outstanding. And so the food security of children, of older adults, of households is at stake. The USDA is undertaking a significant reorganization. So the literal infrastructure of how these programs are administered at the federal level down to the state level is at stake, without effective monitoring and communication to the public. And I would also say state budgets are at stake. They are being put in position to absorb enormous costs for the first time because of HR 1, or what was formerly named the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And a lot of states just literally cannot pay for this. They're either going to have to raise taxes or tap into their rainy day funds, or start to, again, tighten that belt on eligibility criteria and who ultimately is approved. And so there's a lot at stake right now. I think the last thing I would say, too, is just the sense of security that people have in their legislators, in their communities, their faith in democracy. When you start to see all this retraction happen, I think it can breed a kind of insularity that's like, well, why would I turn to the government anyway? Why would I apply for that grant anyway? Why would I try to tie my security or financial health of my organization to federal funding when they can just take it away? And so I think we're going to be dealing with that fallout for years to come, even if things, restore back to a place of abundance, or one that's a little bit more normal and with that status quo. Yeah.
Thank you. Lot to digest there, and I'm glad that I did not try to explain everything that was happening before you answered, because you did such a good job of outlining what's happened over the last year. Taylor, I'll turn to you and I'll say, first of all, I'm notorious at asking bad questions and then setting people up, so I'm going to do my best to phrase this in a better way. But I think about the additional work requirements that have been added, what happened last October with SNAP not being funded during the government shutdown. I think about what's going on at the state level right now, so many other things. And I pose to you, I guess, what narratives are being perpetuated by these shifts in policy? What does this kind of say about our values when we look internally?
Yeah, that's you phrased that really well. And it's a big question. It's something that I think that we within the policy space, trying to assign moral values to policy decisions can be difficult to do. But Bread as an organization believes that hunger and policy are moral issues. And so, trying to look at this through that lens, I see this, and I'm positive Sakeenah would agree, and many of our colleagues within the anti-hunger space. What we're seeing is this as a representation of American values really is an erosion of our 60-year, our nationwide commitment that no one should go hungry. I mean, SNAP is a program that was designed to actually give surplus from farming communities to hungry folks who did not have enough to eat. And that was the genesis, that was the origin story of our nation's most effective, largest anti-hunger program. And what we see now is an erosion of that commitment, in that no one should not have enough food. No one in America, in the most wealthy, most abundant country in the world's history, should not have enough to provide for their family. And that's really disconcerting, both from a moral and value perspective, and also as a policy perspective, because we at Bread believe that hunger is a solvable issue. And so that's challenging when we think about that issue of that erosion of a nationwide commitment. The narratives, I think, vary across the board. I don't want to try to encapsulate them all here, but I think some of the biggest one that we see is that people aren't working hard enough, that they aren't putting in the effort that they deserve food. I tried to think of an allegory or an analogy of this. I think what we've seen is we keep adding more rungs to an already pretty high ladder. And we keep asking people time and time and time again to prove their value, to prove their worth, to prove that they are worthy of being able to eat food. And that's really tough to grapple with in this policy space, in this policy environment. And certainly, I don't say that to assert that the policymakers who are implementing these decisions are acting from an evil or a nefarious or we really want to stick it to the man kind of action. I think they do have really good intentions of fiscal responsibility. I don't think anyone's out there saying we need to spend money wild and erroneously and people shouldn't work. We don't want them working. I don't think anyone is out there making that claim. But I don't think it's an either or. I think you can hold the tension in one hand that you believe people are in there and just inherently valuable and worthy of being able to eat food. and we can be fiscally responsible. I don't think you have to let go of one to hold on to the other. So I think that's kind of where we're at from a values perspective and some of the narratives that we've seen.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was so well said, especially around kind of highlighting the origin of SNAP, right? And at that time, the public opinion about that program was really positive because we did have this commitment to everyone that everyone should have a right to access good food for themselves and their families. And so that erosion of a nationwide commitment, like you said, has just been seen every rung getting higher of how much more critical can we be of those who are in need of services and how that is a disservice. So I appreciate that so much. So in light of that, I mean, this is the narrative that we've been sitting in and swimming in for a long time. So what narratives about food access are missing? And that can be either Taylor or Sakeenah.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'll kick us off with that one. I'm thinking about it in both to kind of harken back to like the idea of abundance and then the idea of deficit. I think there are narratives around both that are missing, and I think we can collectively agree that our policy and political environment has changed so much. We are all experiencing that differently. There are some people who still have a level of economic security and food security, but maybe, the experience at the gas station pump is like, oh, this is more expensive than before. Whereas some people are just literally unable to put food on the table. And so I think I just want to acknowledge that there's a gradient there for how people are struggling in this environment. More than before. I want to appreciate that some of the narratives and a lot of the reporting around children losing access to SNAP has gotten a lot more traction. Children should never, no one should be suffering, but I think it is particularly erroneous when kids do not have enough to eat. They cannot focus in school. In the worst of worst cases, it can be detrimental to their development, but also just the trauma that people can experience from poverty is very real. As an adult now who is gainfully employed and gone through grad school and have all these, fixings of a good American life, that is not how I was raised. My family struggled immensely to put food on the table. Almost every public nutrition program that the USDA administers, I used as a kid and within my own family. And so I know what that struggle looks like and what that feels like. And so I appreciate that there is a close lens on making sure that kids have enough to eat. There are some pieces too of like HR1 that we've yet to see that might impact access to school meals and other child nutrition programs, the categorical eligibility. We do not have to get into the weeds of that right now, but just know that we are paying attention to some of those downstream impacts. I think some of the narratives that I think are missing are impacts on older adults. The challenge that it is to balance your household budget with whether you buy medication, how you use your fixed income, how you pay rent, how you pay your car note, like that. Those aspects of around affordability are really hard. And I think a lot of older adults are not going into the golden years that they thought they were going to be of economic security, of making your fixed income stretch, and how decisions at the federal level affect that and affect those day-to-day lives. And so there's more to be examined there, I think, in this context of food access. And then the last one I'll say, I have two notes written down here around food security in tribal nations and then also food security within the U.S. territories. If you don't know, you don't know about food access in those communities. And I would not posit myself an expert on those things, but I did have the opportunity to really dig into some of our federal nutrition programs in those areas when I was at the USDA. And earlier we were talking about access to food security data and the household food security report. The U.S. territories and tribal nations do not even show up in those data sets. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more of a missed opportunity. And so if we're talking about access, struggling with accessing food, within an urban area or within a rural community within the U.S. mainland, we can also make the educated guess and judgment that in areas that are outside of our regular view, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, these island nations that are not regularly reported on, do not have the same level of economic security or just, sort of economic environment as we do here. the struggle to access food is very different than here. And so we've given a lot of attention to what we refer to as NAP to SNAP, or transitioning the Nutrition Assistance Block Grant to the full SNAP program in Puerto Rico. And just the narratives around that are very challenging. Rates of food insecurity are higher, but just know that there is a constant drumbeat to give more attention to that. But I think more could definitely be done there, and the same for food security in tribal nations. A lot of tribal nations are piloting things before states even do in terms of our federal nutrition programs, and have laid the pathway for things like summer EBT and WIC modernization when they didn't have to do that. It was really the will of those tribal leaders to better serve their communities, and I think we could afford to learn more from that. And then I think the last thing I'll say that I want to see more of in terms of the positive reporting, the abundance, is just the ways that communities are showing up in this era. Justine, I think in our pre-call, I have continued to shout the praises of the Magnolia Mothers Trust in Jackson, Mississippi, and the Universal Basic Income pilots that they have been doing for years, where they give unconditional cash transfers to single Black mothers to buy food, to pay their car notes, to pay their rent, whatever they are doing. And it is single-handedly changing the economic status, the food security status of these households for a group of people, a demographic that has been actively mistrusted by the federal government when it comes to our federal nutrition safety net. And I just love the work of Aisha Nyandoro and of the Magnolia Mothers Trust. And anything they do, just shout it from the rooftops. And so any example like that where they're filling the gap, I think we need more of that. Taylor, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I'll just quickly, these are, several tangential things to what's already been discussed. I will echo Sakeenah's praise of what is being covered as a voracious consumer of all things news and information in the policy space. I think the question is, what should be covered more? There's a lot of really great journalism institutions and podcasts and blogs that are asking these tough questions. And I think part of the issue is the full court press on the issues that we care about, and it's tough for any one thing to get enough oxygen in this space. But I kudos to those folks who are really trying to do a lot of that investigatory work and uncover these issues. I think two things that I've been thinking about, and again, this is not to suggest that they aren't being covered, but there's still a lot more space to go here, is the self-removal of people from these programs, otherwise eligible individuals, who are saying, either it's not worth it, the benefits are no longer enough, the loophole, the hurdles are too much, too high for what I'm getting, and then removing themselves from these assistance programs. I think that needs to be uncovered and explored a little bit more. So to really understand how we address that, and try to figure out what is going on there. I mean, these are folks who are still getting assistance, albeit limited in some cases, and are still eligible and saying, I'm out. And I don't know that we have a clear answer on why that is. The other thing that I'll just quickly talk about, and this may be a little too in the weeds for this audience, so I'll jump in and jump right back out. And that is, I'm a half economist by trade. I say half economist because I minored in it. I should have majored in it. But we're really looking, and this has been touched on in some more of like those economic centric articles and podcasts, but this K-shaped economy in which we had this demarcating point in COVID, and several people are doing better after COVID, and several people are not doing as well. And so I think what we've seen is this really bifurcation point in our economy in which half of the economy is doing great and has no clue what the other half is doing, and half the economy is really struggling, and they're looking up to the people that are doing really well and say, how come I'm not part of that group? And so I think the questions that I'm asking are like, what are the root causes? Like, there's something in the fabric of how our economy is working that isn't working. And so how do we address that? Because for all of the nutrition assistance programs that we have, and as important as they are, they're not going to address why half of the economy can't find work, why half of the economy is working 3-4 jobs and still not able to put food on the table or provide for childcare or access transportation. Those nutrition assistance programs, while important, aren't going to answer those questions. And if we're serious about providing food and providing economic mobility and advancement for people, we need to be asking those questions. They're difficult, but we need to be asking them. And so those are some of the things that I think, again, they are being covered, but we need to dig into them a little bit more from my perspective.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And as a half journalist with a journalism minor, I can say, it's hard to cover difficult things, right? So sometimes you don't, because it's how hard it is to get into the weeds. The amount of good journalism that has been done in North Carolina on the counties having to cover the administrative cost share, it's been few and far between. But when it is good, it's like, wow, you talk to county commissioners, you talk to people who knew. And to your second point, Taylor, it sounds like Arizona is going to be one of the case studies for people opting out of the benefits. For those of you who have seen this, the rate of people coming off of SNAP, I think it's 10% North Carolina. I feel like it's in that range for a lot of states. And for Arizona, I think last I saw, it was nearly 50%. And I think it's, I'm not the expert. I think it's because the amount of rungs that have been added to the ladder and that there are fewer people who are there to help people along the ladder is what it seems to be doing. And it's just happening faster and quicker in the state of Arizona. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. I'll pivot here, and if I mess that up, one of y'all correct me when you answer this question. But I think I feel this in my bones and soul, and I'm sure that other people do as well, that when things are happening rapidly right in front of you, it can be a little hard to look down the road 5 to 10 years, to think of a positive vision, to think of the abundance that we have to offer, what it might be. So my question for you all is, what do leaders within the food system or anyone who cares about advancing the right to food or social and economic racial justice need to consider as we ideate, that's a hard word to say, 5, 10 years down the road? What are those things that we should be thinking about?
I have two things that I want to highlight, but Taylor, I'm curious if you're already maybe teed up and thinking about Social Security. Otherwise, I would not touch that. Are you thinking about that?
Well, this is one of those issues that we can hop into and hop right back out. But because I spend a fair amount of my time thinking about these root cause structural issues, one of the things that I was listening to a piece on the radio yesterday, and my generation, kind of the younger-ish, middle to younger millennials, and then every generation after that has already written off Social Security. We're not going to get it. It's a pipe dream. And that is juxtaposed deeply and significantly on the older workforce who has spent a career paying into the social trust fund. And now we're saying, based on the latest report, that might not come to fruition for that group. And so thinking about there are really bold strategic policy proposals out there. But yes, I'm thinking about those things. That is a 5 to 10 year plan. In the case that somebody wants to grab a hold of that third rail of American politics and hold on strongly. But those are some of the things that I'm thinking about, and bread, not writ large, because we are very much focused on the here and now and playing a lot of defense against the current, if you will, current things that are going on. But I think to the broader point of the question is, if you accept the hypothetical or the position that the programs that do provide, this is from a very federal level, the programs that do provide food assistance, that provide economic stability and security, if you accept the posit that those have largely been opened up, they've been cracked open and potentially undermined, and to use the word that I used earlier, eroded, then as I view it, it's not enough to just put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We need to think about what comes next and how we make them better. If they've been cracked open, if they've been opened up, now is a good time to not just repair, but improve. And so what are those policy proposals that somebody has stuck in a box in a drawer somewhere, and they're like, I don't want to open that can of worms right now. The can of worms has been opened. And so now that we have an access to the inner workings of these programs, what can we do to make things better? Again, that's from a very federal nutrition program. The other thing that I'll quickly add is thinking about shifting from food security to food sovereignty in deciding what it is you eat and why you eat certain things and when. I personally am a big seasonal eater. I don't know where your audience is based on, if you have listeners from around the country or if it's in a particular region, but there is nothing better. So we're recording this. I don't know when this will be. We're recording this in early August. Right now is the best time to go get a tomato out of a garden. You don't go to the supermarket. Farmers markets are great, but there are few things that are better than going out to your garden or getting produce from a friend or a neighbor and a tomato from their garden, because it just hits different. And so like I use that practice across all of my culinary, and so like I view that as like my kind of vein of food sovereignty, is like I eat seasonally. And I think as a consumer, as a culture, we need to be thinking about what it is we eat, where it comes from, and more of that sustainable portion as well, which is something that Bread has done a lot of work on in terms of sustainability as well. So that's not something that we're focusing on now, but in that 5 to 10 year kind of large zoom out scale, I want to see us move more from like, do you have enough to eat, which is an important topic, don't get me wrong, but what are you eating? What is the quality of what are you eating? Where is it coming from? And is it aiding you and your understanding of food and food systems, which is so important.
Thanks for tackling that, and especially that first point on Social Security. I know the economics hat is on for that one. I have a couple of things here, and I just want to say, at a sort of broad level, when thinking about leadership in the food systems space, that's going to look so different depending on where you are. I'm born and raised in California and have spent a lot of time in DC. Also used to live in New Orleans many years ago, and have been really fortunate to meet leaders from a broad swath of states and regions and genders and racial and ethnic backgrounds, ages. And I think a really important thing going 5, 10 years down the line, I want us to be thinking now about, what does leadership cultivation look like, and what does it mean to pass that mantle on to the next person? I think if you spent any time within, maybe a national nonprofit or even a local nonprofit, there are leaders in place who are brilliant, who are just there for a long time and have that long view. But I have also had the experience of just kind of being a worker bee, in my earlier career, in my earlier 20s, and immediately knew that there is no room for me to grow unless I leave. And so I want food system leaders to be thinking about, what does cultivation of leadership in the next generation look like? That might look like having a robust internship program. That might look like having a fellowship where you are prioritizing people with lived experience, which I know a lot of organizations have done that. Paying people fairly and equitably and commensurate with their experience, and also the cost of living where you are. And so leadership does not happen in a vacuum, and leadership does not happen automatically. You have to invest time and resources in younger people, but also in people who need a second chance. Maybe they're reentering their community after a period of incarceration. Maybe their immigration status has changed. Maybe they had significant caregiving duties for their children, or for, other people who might have been under their care, or for a parent and had to exit the labor market. I think we should be thinking robustly about paving ways for opportunities and getting uncomfortable with the idea that someone who has been at the top of an organization for decades should just be there because they've been there. We have to make room for other leaders in that space to also test out new, sort of modes of leadership, and just making space. I think that can be manifest as an individual experience, but I think any sort of audit of major organizations will probably see, who's been at the top the longest. What does it look like to cultivate leadership in that space? So I think that's an important piece. And I think that's just kind of been like grilled in me from the time that I was doing like AmeriCorps 10 years ago, and have had the opportunity to progressively grow in different positions of leadership. We also have 2 wonderful like interns this summer. Love intern programs. Pay your interns. Always pay your interns. And make sure that they can take care of themselves while they are doing intellectual labor and thinking and thought partnership with you. That's one thing. I think food systems leaders also have to think about the fact, I think Taylor alluded to this too, it's not just about putting food on the table. People would not need to rely on SNAP and WIC and other means-tested programs or programs where you have categorical eligibility if you had a good job that paid you a livable wage. People need good jobs. People need access to economic opportunity. And it's not just going to be on that one food systems leader to generate jobs for everybody, but what does it look like to be in coalition with a local economic development corporation that has a job training program, or thinking about robust opportunities for like summer youth job programs or things of that nature. People need money in their pockets and in their banks, and they need to be able to save and, cover expenses for a rainy day. And so we can think broadly about putting food on a table, growing food, but people really need access to sufficient economic opportunity that gives them a livable wage. And a lot of that kind of ties back to basic needs. If you're experiencing homelessness, if your housing is also insecure, you are going to struggle to eat. And so while we can be the food people, the nutrition people, we have to think about all the things that make a good life. And that's having safe housing, that's having access to a good job, having access to health insurance that is not going to, break your bank account for yourself or for your children. And so I think food system leaders have to think about the whole person and the whole household. And then beyond that, the whole community. I would also say this, we have a climate portfolio at Bread for the World. And our colleague Isabel is so brilliant at the work that she does and the analysis that she brings to the organization. But our climate is changing. And there are lots of projections around access to water and clean air and farmable land. And I'm not going to posit myself the expert on any of those things right now. But what do we do when it's not safe to live where you live anymore? When people are migrating for safety within the United States, but also coming to and leaving this country as well. And so I think any analysis around food access and food security, especially from a geographical perspective, is we're going to have to think about our changing climate and environment. Every summer is the hottest summer on record. It has been for years and years and years. And so I think when we are listening to the people who have that data, who have that knowledge, and can also come up with actionable steps around safeguarding communities and safeguarding our food system, and also protecting the health of people who are often exposed to extreme heat, we have to be thinking about that too from a safety perspective, but also being better stewards of our environment. I think I'll stop there. I think I just really want to hark on the fact that leadership, it just doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to cultivate it. And there's another pathway I could go down just thinking about our federal infrastructure, but I'll save that maybe for another time.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for your thought on that. And there's a lot looking ahead and a lot to focus on, and it takes everyone to bring their expertise to kind of address it holistically. So totally appreciate that. Also love that we pivoted from Social Security to picking tomatoes in your garden. Only here can we do that and have that conversation and have it still make sense. So I love that. Thanks for that, Taylor. Really briefly, we got one last couple questions. But in the work of policy advocacy, how do you stay grounded in the experiences and stories of those who directly impact your work? So each could share a little briefly about that.
I'm happy to kick us off, and then I'll turn it back over to Sakeenah. I think it's very kind of niche or kind of rote to say, but you have to be in community and conversation. As someone that has dedicated much of their career to the policy space, good policy is informed by data. Data is informed by people. And so I think every data point that we have that where we make a policy suggestion or recommendation is somebody's true real life story. And so while we can look at the data and kind of synthesize and summarize, that really falls flat if you're not truly understanding what the person on the other end of that data point is experiencing day to day. We do our best and oftentimes fail to do it well, but we do our best to be in constant communication with our organizing team within Bread, who is on the ground doing the work of mobilizing and understanding and hearing what issues are impacting certain communities. we try to be in constant communication with them and infuse that work into our work. Personally, I do what I can to get involved in my local community. And while my local community is not necessarily representative of all communities across the U.S., I think it's a pretty good snapshot. And so volunteering when I can, whether that be at my local boards and community foundations to understand those real local issues, but also trying to be in service with my time and food banks and food pantries, making sure that people have enough to eat, because policy alone isn't going to solve it in this particular moment. And so I think all of those things together in aggregate really help provide my worldview of how we progress in the policy space. It provides better informed decisions, and it provides, at the end of the day, more effective policy to address the issues we're hoping to address.
I think you hit all the points, Taylor. I'll just add a couple more things. From a real functional perspective, doing site visits, you got to see programs in action. You got to see where people are. I love my job. I think the only thing I lament is that I don't get to spend nearly as much time on farms as I used to when I was with Berkeley Food Institute, and seeing demonstration projects in action, meeting with both, farm owners and farm workers and people, everybody in between, aggregators, is just like seeing both that nutrition and agriculture perspective together is so robust. But yeah, go to the field, go see where people are, see how programs are working, systematically collect data and report your findings to people who are funders, to your leadership, to people who can make actionable decisions, to members of Congress. Do that storytelling piece. And then just from like a personal orientation, I have to touch grass. I mean, I think there's a better way to say that, but like, for me, touching grass, going to church, working within our ministry for people who need extra help paying rent, who need some extra food assistance, who need some diapers, been to a community baby shower. Like, you have to just be where people are. I've been a resident of DC on and off for about 15 years now. It's my second home, but part of that is just being in community, and part of that is also just going home. The people who will humble you the fastest are your own family members. Don't get too big, don't do too much. And sometimes I just need to go home. I need to go to my local grocery store. I need to ride the bus. I don't own a car or vehicle here in DC, but I grew up exclusively taking public transit in San Diego, which is one of the most expensive cities in the country. But where I grew up in Southeast San Diego, the bus is right there. The trolley station is right there. Like, everything my community needed was pretty centrally located. But I think it's about being shoulder to shoulder and being proximate to your neighbors and to people who know you and can say you so-and-so's baby, and I went to high school with your mom. Like, you lose that when you move as much as I have. And so a big part of staying grounded is just going home. The other half of my family are from North Carolina. I went to my family reunion last summer, and it was like, whoa, we all look alike. We cannot deny each other. I love this. And folks there are, grew up in a rural area. There used to be a farm in the family in Apex, North Carolina. And I think I just have to remember that I come from people, that I come from a family that has many a lived experience, but are strong and resilient and, fight, but also love each other. And I think there's something about DC that can just kind of put you in this policy and political vortex where you're you have your blinders on and you can just lose touch. And so part of that is sometimes getting out of DC, but also bringing people here. Bring people here to raise their voice, to do that advocacy, to build up that muscle, to do that. And yeah, I think we could all afford to touch a little more grass and to just be in touch and proximate to the things that matter to us.
That's lovely. Thank you. So that'll do it for, I guess, our food kind of questions. We're going to try to end with a question I think we're going to ask every time. We had Derek Weston on last episode. His former podcast, they ended with what's bringing you hope right now. Derek, if you're listening, we've decided to just rip you off completely. We're ripping it off. We're just going to ask it slightly differently. We're going to say, what is bringing you joy? It's definitely different. It's not the same. We're going to try that out for a while and see how that goes. So I want to ask each of you, what's bringing you joy? I can start in case you need a minute to think about it, because mine came to me very quickly. Life is fast right now. Like you said, I need to touch grass. My way of touching grass, which I don't think anyone else is doing who is my age, is putting my earphones in, putting the Atlanta Braves game on the radio, 680 The Fan, and walking around my neighborhood and listening to the crack of the bat and the slow pace. I love it on the radio. I've watched the games anyway, but I love listening to it because it just slows you down. And even though I do have the hot take that baseball has become too fast, I went to a game during Bulls game the other day and it was over in an hour and 58 minutes. I love baseball on the radio. So that's what's been bringing me joy lately. And whoever wants to take it can just jump in.
I've got two things. The WNBA is bringing me a lot of joy. I did not grow up playing sports. I am not a sporty person. I just learned what a triple-double and a double-double are. But it has been so fun, and everyone should be watching women's sports. So go that. And then the other thing that is bringing me joy, I have a lot of people in my life who have summer birthdays. I am a winter baby. My birthday is January 19th. It is typically falling over the MLK holiday weekend. There might be a snowstorm outside. But all my friends and my partner who have summer birthdays, they're just like they're the birthday. They're Leos. They're just big energy and they want everybody to celebrate them. And I'm happy to do that. I am so into it. But also when it's winter and it's my birthday, they have to come over and do quiet celebrations and be wintry with me, or go somewhere warm, depending on the year. But I am enjoying, my sister, two of my nieces, my partner, one of my best friends who's turning 30, all summer birthdays. It is just a little bit too much sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah, those two things.
Next podcast, we can talk about salary caps, David, within the NBA and why we all dislike the Dodgers at the moment, unless you're a Dodgers fan. So I'll say two things and one is because time is a flat circle and we need to put a bow on it. I spend many of my mornings before work sitting on the porch with my coffee. I live in a pretty rural area, and I, for the first time ever, saw a summer tanager sit in the tree right in front of my porch. I thought it was a cardinal at first because they have very similar coloring. And I was like, that beak looks a little off. And I pulled up my bird identification app and it was a summer tanager. And I thought, what a fitting way to start a summer morning. So that brought me a lot of joy. I am a birder. And so that brought me a lot of joy. And then the other thing that is bringing me a lot of joy right now is I'm a fairly avid sportsman. I do a lot of fishing and hunting. There's a group of friends that we hunt fairly regularly during whitetail season. And we were really successful last year. And so in preparation for this year, we are now getting to where we are processing we do all of our own processing pretty much exclusively. So once we've done like roasts and all of kind of like the whole parts, you have a lot of this ground meat to do, ground venison to work with. And we made some excellent jalapeno cheddar sausage links the other day. And that brings me a lot of joy, just getting together with that group of friends and their wives. And we're all, we're working through the venison that we harvested and we're processing it and putting meat in our freezer. And just that whole experience, getting together with friends and being in community brings me a lot of joy recently.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I would like some of that jalapeno cheddar sausage. That sounds incredible. For me, I just got back from our annual vacation to Northern Michigan, which is where my family and my roots are from. And rocks and loons. If I could just, synthesize it, loons are amazing. They don't live down here in North Carolina, and they live where we sit, and I get to hear them every night and in the morning. And my aunt gifted me with a loon necklace, so I'm really living on just a loon high right now. I'm a little loony. I went there. And I love looking for rocks and stones with my kids. I've showed them the joy of just what it means to stand by the shore of the lake and just stare at rocks and look for rocks and special rocks for hours and never really get bored. And that brings me a lot of joy. So
that sounds really special. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Well, we want to thank you all for being here for the third episode of Food and Conversations. If you're not already, hope you will subscribe, rate, review, do the things on wherever you listen to your podcast. We'd love for you to follow us on our Instagram page at Raffi_CTTT. We just did a storytelling night this week in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where, when we got to the church, they were set up for VBS. It was Rainforest Cafe vibes. We'll have a reel on our Instagram page in the next couple of days. So if you want to see me standing in front of a cut-out anteater we are going to have a video for you on Rafi's Come to the Table's Instagram page. So follow us along there. Could one of you guys give us a quick plug for where we can follow your work on or Bread for the World's work?
Absolutely. We are at bread.org.
You got at bread? Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say your Instagram handle was just bread.
No.
I was going to say, wow, that's valuable. Hold on to that.
Bread for the World. We do own the hyperlink, like the URL. It is bread.org. That will take you to our website. We also do a monthly or sometimes bi-monthly publication called Institute Insights, where you can see some of our thinking on display and analysis that also incorporates storytelling with the goal of moving people towards advocacy. And I'm on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn pretty regularly. I try not to share too much personal stuff on there, but it has turned out to be a really great source of connection and to uplift some of our work. Lots of connection with younger folks and recent college grads too. So I'm always down for a 30-minute coffee virtual chat with folks. And then a lot of Bread's work is also on LinkedIn too. I'm on Instagram. My handle is Bazzberries, but there's nothing interesting. I do not post about work on the internet. That is for funny animal videos, my nieces and nephews, and I love the Discover Animal page and the Cincinnati Zoo. It's a private page. I'm there if you want to follow, but there's nothing else there.
Anything from you, Taylor, you want us to make sure we get out there?
I am not online hardly at all. I'm terrible. Yeah. I would never update it. But if you want to shoot me an email, my profile of my who I am on Bread is at bread.org. So you can find us. Feel free to shoot me an email. Would love to, as Sakeenah said, we can chat either in an email thread or can set up some time to meet virtually. Love that.
T. Johnson at Bread, S. Shabazz at bread.org. That's us.
Sweet.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. That does it for another episode of Food and Conversations. We'll see you next time. Thanks.